Minister of Labour, Nkiruka Onyoji-Ocha, disclosed this in an interview with Channels Television on Tuesday. She explained that the government has done virtually everything in the agreement, at least 90% of everything. According to the minister, the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress told the government representatives at a meeting on Tuesday that the protest was not about the government's commitment to the October agreement, but food inflation. She said food security and economic prosperity were two of the priorities of the Bola Tinubu administration. She therefore appealed to Nigerians to be patient with the new government as the administration is in its planting season with harvest on the horizon. Meanwhile, the Senate has called on the federal government to adopt the food stamp measure to reduce hardship and high cost of living in the country. The upper chamber also directed the Federal Ministry of Agriculture to liaise with relevant institutions to ensure the implementation of the interventionist program. The lawmakers made the call on Tuesday during the plenary after adopting a motion to introduce the food stamps as an intervention to halt the worsening economic situation in the country. The resolution was seconded to a motion jointly sponsored by the Senate's Chief Whip Ali Ndume and the Kwara Central Senator Saliu Mustafa. Ndume, while presenting his motion, explained that there is a need for the introduction of food stamp to assist Nigerians to overcome the inflation and high cost of living challenges. The senator, who represents Borno South on the platform of the All Progressives Congress (APC), urged the Nigerian government to emulate other developed countries with the introduction of the food stamp. Well, now joining me to discuss this and other issues on the World News at 12 this afternoon, I have with me Barrister Evans Ufeli. He is a legal practitioner as well as a political and national affairs analyst. Welcome to the conversation, Barrister Ufeli. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here. Let's begin with the NLC protest, which, according to the president of the NLC, achieved overwhelming and massive success, as there were no casualties. In fact, it's the one time in Nigeria where we have a protest that was not hijacked by hoodlums, where there was no report of violence from the police or from the protesters, and indeed we're happy about that. But the NLC has come now to propose a 17-point demand with measures they say to mitigate the increasing hardship in the country, one of which is the reopening of borders, the removal of collection of levies across all markets by local and state governments, the implementation of the October 2, 2023 agreement, purchase and deployment of CNG buses across all states of the country. The NLC is also asking for a suspension or reversal of increase in school fees across the nation, and really so many other demands that the NLC are making, seeing that the October 2, 2023 agreement has not been fully implemented. And now the NLC is now presenting a 17-point demand to the federal government as well. How can we expect this to be implemented if that of October last year has not been implemented?
No, don't say that of October last year has not been implemented. That of October last year is being implemented. You see, from the 6 months, 35,000 naira the federal government promised, they have paid 4 months. Now they are processing the remaining 2 months. Okay? Now, the agreement seems to be in progress, okay. But I like what NLC is doing by giving them more work to do, okay. Now you have 17. The other one they have been implementing to a point. It's good for the federal government to have enough work in its hand because because of the long neglect, okay, it has cost the workers of this country and the general masses of this country. Put them into severe hardship by its very unwitty policies. If you look at it, there are two issues were raised by the NLC as to why the cost of living went overboard. One of which was the removal of subsidy unwittingly, and secondly was the flotation of the foreign currency. And so those two issues became an albatross, and the federal government of the view that they should not be blamed for not finding solutions. That I read this morning. But by and large, the 7 points is not bad. If you look at it, they are very critical, especially the first 4, talking about opening the border to allow for food and the cement and other issues, other material needs to come into the country. Yeah, it is important you have that because that will have an effect on price. Okay, so there was the battle. What we're battling now is cost of living, which was promoted by a policy of government. So if you want to tackle, because cost of living is brutal, it is the cost of living can break down anything, including democracy. You understand? So that is why it is important that you handle cost of living with tact, with knowledge, and with strategy. So what NLC is proposing for me in that 7 points is critical. Let the federal government see to it and see to the implementation of the other, see to the full implementation of the other agreements made in October 2nd.
That's the 15-point memorandum of understanding. Right now, the Minister of Labour, Nkiruka Onyejocha, came out yesterday on television to say that about 90, the Minister of State for Labour, rather, thank you, came out to say 90% of everything in that 15-point memorandum of understanding signed with organised labour last year has been implemented. And now, when you say 90% of this has been implemented, where are the CNG buses? Because right now, it's in this 17-point demand from organized labor again.
She's wrong. That was insensitive. I saw that, and I think government will need to deploy the right kind of spokesperson on issues like this. These are times that tribesmen so, and the government must communicate effectively. Otherwise, there will be a breakthrough somewhere. The people have coordinated themselves so far so good to this point, and I think the federal government should commend the general masses of this country to have conducted themselves under such harsh economic conditions. There are countries in Africa who didn't go through half of what we have gone through, and they broke loose into a war and insurrection and all that. But that we should be commended. Then too, the federal government must get the right kind of person to communicate to the public. If you say that 90% of the agreement, the one reached in October 2nd, 2023, has been, taken care of, that is not correct, because you have not paid the 6 months. Okay, the electric buses, the gas mobile buses, I would not see them. The only one I've seen is the one that was owned by Lagos State government. So what exactly is she saying to that effect? If she does not have the fact, all she needs to do is to get the record so that she can communicate effectively to the public. NLC couldn't have come out and say, make this implementation if the implementation has gotten to 90%. It couldn't have been so. These issues were meant to be implemented for workers, for people. And if the people have not seen 90% and you are telling the general public that you have done 90%, it means there's lack of sincerity and the lack of tact and strategy. So the government must deploy the right kind of expression in times like this, and that's what I think is very important.
Thank you so much, Barrister Ufeli. Let's move to the Senate, who is calling on the federal government to adopt food stamp measures to reduce hardship and, of course, the high cost of living in the country. Now, this was a motion sponsored by the Senate Chief Whip Ali Ndume. He's saying that it is time for the federal government to deploy food stamp like it is done in other countries, the USA, which is the food stamp is a government issued coupon given to low income and non-income persons. It's like subsidizing food for people. When people get food stamp, they can get food at subsidized rates or at really no amount at all to them. Would this really curb the issue of food scarcity or food insecurity in Nigeria as it is right now? If the borders are not opened, if people cannot go to their farms and farm due to the issues of insecurity, can food stamps really be the answer to the issue of food in the country right now?
No, food stamps generally all over the world is not for the entire population of the country. I hope people will get it right. It's for indigent people. You understand? Because now you have a bill and they are going through readings and all that. It should be specified and spelled out carefully that food stamps all over the world is meant for indigent people. Because I know how Nigerians operate now. When you say food stamp, everybody will now come out and queue somewhere and start stampeding. Okay? This food stamp is a good idea, because if you look at Section 14.2 of the Constitution, it says the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. So why not? Why? I mean, the security and welfare, the welfare of the people is a critical factor in the advancement of political economy. Okay, so what is required here is that that bill should not be rushed. I know that times are hard and we need to come up with the right legislation, but it should not be rushed. It should be done in such a way that the essence is captured, such that we're able to get the demographics. And I don't think you can effectively implement that law without data. You understand? You see, multiple issues.
And we've always had that issue of data in Nigeria.
You will always fall back to that because it is the yardstick for planning. Okay? If you are going to talk about food stamp, that is part of planning, economic planning, to reach out to terms of their welfare. So we start to have that data. So I think that law should be worked on concurrently or simultaneously with an effective national data that will be able to identify the indigents among the entire population, so that you can streamline the food stamp and the production. Because what it means is that it doesn't mean, food stamp does not mean that food is going to become free. What it means is that people who have it can go get food and the federal government will pay the vendors. That's what it means. You cannot use that food stamp as an exchange for goods, for food items, but that does not end that the federal government will have to now pay the vendors of food stuff and all that. So the implementation has to be thorough, and there must be an alliance between the federal government and the state government for this to work. Okay, because the federal government really don't have citizens; it's the states that have citizens. Okay. And what they will do is to partner with the state government and see whether state will have a counterpart funding on it. The federal will have, and the state will have a counterpart funding on it, so that the state government, if these food stamps are issued, the state government can co-administer it with the federal government, because it's actually from the local government that you can identify the indigents and all that. There are people who don't need food stamps. I mean, how be it that we have a very large population of poor people? There are people who don't need. So once those demographics are cut off, whatever is left becomes those who need it. So the strategy must be right, the law must be right, and there should be punitive measures for impersonation, because there may be abuse of that. And that abuse must be factored into the legislation to ensure that you have a legislation that is robust, far-reaching, that can solve the problem and nip this in the bud.
Thank you, Barrister Ufeli. A very final question on the World News at 12 today will be an underlying factor of it all, cutting the cost of governance. On Monday, the President announced that there will be a full implementation of the Stephen Orosanye report, which was released about 11-12 years ago now. And we're expecting many ministries to be subsumed, many to be merged together. There are ministries, going by the Orosanye report, there are ministries that really they have the same functions, so why not merge them together to reduce the cost of governance? But critics of the government, and of course even supporters alike, are saying that, look, many people will lose their jobs. Is this something that just has to happen in the interest of many?
My fear at that is the way this president goes about policy and his huge deposit of ignorance and thoughtlessness is my fear. The strategy to deploy to this Orosanye, as at the time the Orosanye report was put together, the dynamics of this country is not the same, is not what you have today. So if you are visiting that report, and if you are revisiting that report and you want to implement it, you have to factor in the changes that have occurred between that time and now. Okay? And see how those variables, and think whether those variables can be addressed alongside implementation. Otherwise, if you go ahead to just say because there's a report on ground, therefore we'll just start implementation tomorrow, this government will still run into more problems than it has already. Because you cannot between that time and now, population has increased. Between that time and now, the economic condition of the country has taken a different direction. Between that time and now, policies have been made that. So I am not against the implementation of the Orosanye report, But I'm of the view that it must be done in such a way that would not increase unemployment or unemployability. It must be done in such a way that you reduce the cost of governance primarily by looking at duplication of function, institutions that are duplicating functions. Okay, like if you look at the National Assembly, for the House of Reps and the Senate, what they do is just almost the same thing. They move a bill here, they take it to their place. They do almost the same thing. So in a country where you have gotten to a level where you need to conserve resources, you should be talking about a unicameral legislature. And then some other institutions that have two double functions, you should be talking about streamlining them into one. And possibly retire those who should be retired. And those who have retired, and then those goes to work, take them off. Then cut down wastages, budgeting, and all other things. There are a lot of issues that lead to wastages. Those ones can be abridged and completely eliminated. So that we now have a functionable civil service system where you can actually drive policy and create good governance for the larger society and the populace.
Barrister Ofeli, I want to ask, right, is it not ironic that the same administration that wants to implement this report to cut down the cost of governance has there's been an appointment of over 50 ministers. We literally have a spokesman for the president, a media spokesman, and then we have the one for media and the publicity. Even in the president's cabinet, there are people who are you have a Bayo Ononuga on one part, you have Ajuri Ngelale. What does Bayo Ononuga want to say that Ajuri Ngelale cannot tell to Nigerians? So how do we reconcile the appointment of almost over 50 ministers on one hand and the implementation of a report which would cut down the cost of governance on the other hand? Are you there, Barrister Evans? Oh dear, we lost Barrister Ofeli there for a minute. We'll try to reach out to him one more time, and then the World News at 12 continues. Welcome back, Barrister Ofeli. The line went off there for a minute. So I was asking the question, my very final question, so I can let you go. On one hand, the president has over 15 ministers, and I was talking about how we have a Bayo Ononuga, who's a media spokesman, and we have Ajuri Ngelale, who's a media and publicity person. These are really almost like duplicated functions, right? How do we reconcile the implementation of a report that will reduce the cost of governance and also the appointment of over 50 ministers on two different hands?
That is the irony of this government. This government is thoughtless. I keep saying it. The strategy to lead, the unpreparedness is very clear from the outset. You find that now they're talking about implementing the Orosara's report. That report, have they read that report to notice that its objective is a complete reduction of multifunctions or double functions on the same issues? Okay, so that there will be enough resources to manage the economy of the country and take care of the citizens. That's exactly the objective of that report. Now they are jumping at implementing it, whereas what they have done in terms of appointment, okay, already have overstretched governance itself. Not just the two persons you mentioned now. In the presidency, okay, you have a media team there, a media team other than Ngelale and Bayo Ononuga. You have a communication and media team, a whole host of some TV presenters, some former TV presenters from some of the TV stations and radio stations were all employed to work. It's good for us to create employment, but while we're creating employment, we need to also look at the larger society to ensure that there are no wastages, that we're able to curtail wastages and advance governance so that everyone will feel the dividend of democracy. So this government will have to do a lot of thinking around the economic possibilities of implementation of the reference report and reducing cost of governance by tinkering with major government parastatals to reduce the cost of governance.
Thank you so much, Barrister Ivan Sufeli. Honestly, thank you so much for joining me on such short notice for the World News at 12 this afternoon. It's been a real pleasure. God bless you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the World News at 12 right here on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. The presidency has defended President Bola Tinubu's decision to include his sons among the delegation going with him to Qatar. President Tinubu's sons, Sheyi and Yinka, were among the delegation of members to travel with the president on a state visit to Doha, Qatar. The president will visit the Arabian country for business and investment meetings scheduled for March 2 and 3, 2024, but will be accompanied by 38 others, including his two sons. Following the development, the president came under fire for including his sons in the delegation to Qatar for the state visit. Reacting in a post via his official X handle on Tuesday, the senior special assistant to the president on digital and the new media, Otega Ogra, said the president's decision was not a new thing and it is not uncommon. Ogra said that some world leaders will take their children on state visits to educate them about world affairs and different cultures and to maintain a semblance of family life despite the demands of public office. The presidential aide therefore asked Nigerians to stop majoring in minor things and focus on relevant issues. On the foreign scene, President Joe Biden is projected to win Michigan's Democratic presidential primary comfortably, despite a significant protest vote over his stance towards the war in Gaza. Activists have spent recent weeks urging Democrats to vote uncommitted, and tens of thousands chose to do so. That exceeds many expectations, though the latest news projections suggest Biden won 80% of the vote overall. The U.S. is an ally of Israel, providing it with billions of dollars in military aid. The U.S. position has angered many people, including in Biden's own party, who want the president to take a stronger stance against Israel's military campaign. Earlier this month, the U.S. vetoed a UN resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, while proposing a draft of its own urging a temporary ceasefire. And that's it on the World News at 12. Just before we wrap up, let's take a look at the top stories again. You heard that the NLC has suspended its protest and presented a 17-point demand to the federal government. Lawmakers urge the federal government to adopt a food stamp approach to curb economic hardship. Job loss fear looms as presidency orders implementation of Orensoye report, and presidency defends Tinubu over son's inclusion in delegation to Qatar. On the foreign scene, Biden wins the Michigan primary despite Gaza protest vote. And that is a wrap on the World News at 12. My name is Ijeoma Innocent. Please follow our social media handles at VOP903FM for coverage of your live events and brand news mentioned on our news bulletins. Do send the mail to news@voiceofthepeople.ng. Good afternoon and thank you for listening. Do stay tuned. Up next is Matters with Ikami Jude.